Our topic was, how do we embrace cultural differences after living in a diverse community of many cultural backgrounds? So we got to this question because we were thinking about making something about religion and culture, and I was saying, yeah, a lot of cultures in the boarding house, there are a lot of differences. And so we got to that question by just our own experiences and talking about that, having discussion.
A couple of weeks ago, we conducted interviews with people from the boarding house. From this, we created 4 generic examples. We must stress that these examples do not represent any one particular person, and examples have been exaggerated to emphasize cultural stereotypes.
This is my second year in the boarding house.
1.5 years.
I lived here for I think 2.5 years, yeah.
4.5 years.
I like here. First of all, I arrived at the boarding house. I was really nervous and didn't talk much to other people because my limit of my English, and I was a bit shy. But now I get along with everyone, and I'm really happy to stay here. I got 50 friends from all over the world. Yeah.
Well, I like talking to the Germans because they're familiar to me and they're really nice. And I also like talking to the Australians because, they're Western too and I kind of understand them. But I don't really like to talk to the Chinese and Japanese, like all the Asians, because I don't understand their bizarre eating habits.
I've just learned so much about other cultures and languages being here in the boarding house that I never knew before. I knew some words, but just coming here, I just know so many words just because, the Germans or Chinese or whatever just use them all the time. I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. I love making international friends. Over the Christmas holidays, just this past, 6 months ago, I went to visit friends in Germany, and my brothers both went to Japan, so, that's pretty cool. We would have never had those opportunities before, had I not come to such an international boarding house. I think it's really cool.
Well, I've lived here for so long. I've had people from all over the world who live with me, and I have contacts from all over the world, actually. I've seen so many people come and go that I've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah, I get along very well with Germans. They're really nice to me and they talk a lot, really outgoing. Yeah, easy to make friends with them.
Well, of course there are some personalities I don't really like and I don't really understand. But mostly I talk to everyone, but especially Asians, past experience have taught me that we don't really have a lot of things in common, so therefore I don't really try. And also Australians sometimes are really fake, and I think they just should be more straightforward, and yeah.
I usually find it really easy to talk to everyone, but when I first came, I was kind of quiet, but I think everyone is, and now I sort of have this reputation for being one of the loud people in the boarding house, and they're oh yeah, those loud Americans. But actually I think everyone's kind of shy when they first come, so I think it's really good to come to a boarding house because you just sort of have this circle of people who will accept you because everybody here is so different. It's that's the thing they have in common. But at the same time, obviously, I'm closer to some people than others because you can't be best friends with 50 people. But I'd say that I'm pretty much good friends with almost everybody.
I pretty much get along with everyone at the boarding house because I've lived with so many personalities and different personalities that I can deal with most people. There was one German who I just couldn't stand. She was really rude. But she left a couple of years ago. Everyone else is fine. Most of the Germans and other Europeans seem to be pretty outgoing and crazy. And a lot of the Asians are quiet and introverted. I like the Americans. They seem pretty much the same as us, but maybe a bit more, outgoing, I guess. I don't know. Australians are pretty outgoing. We're pretty friendly people. Alright. Katie, the American's responses reflect her cultural paradigm. She comes from the United States of America, which is a large country where the great majority of people speak English and follow similar customs. This could explain why Katie is eager to embrace new cultures and languages. Also, Katie did not specify any particular cultures she feels more comfortable with. This could be a reflection of the fact that she is the only American of her age in the boarding house, so she has the opportunity to make friends with different cultures.
From the interview, we found that Germans are more talkative compared with Asians, because the actual lifestyle is very similar to the Western countries, so it is easier for them to get used to the environment in the boarding house. Same as all international students, they are more likely to talk with people from their country. German is a language which is similar with English, so it is easier for them for their general life.
Australian people seem to have fewer problems with the cultural mesh. This could be caused by the fact that they do not have to get used to their surroundings and therefore have fewer things to adapt to. International people come from a different country and not just have to adapt to the new surroundings, but also have and the culture, but also have to deal with all the other cultures they live with. Australians have it easier as they have fewer things to adapt to. Also, Australians do deal very well with all the other cultures and do not have problems with people based on their cultural background.
Tony's interview was a summary of the Chinese interview answers taken from the boarding house. I noticed that some of his answers conflicted with Cleo's interview as a German. One in particular was that Tony said he was especially good friends with Germans. However, in Cleo's interview, she made a point of the fact that she felt she didn't have very much in common with Tony and found it difficult to communicate with him due to language barriers and extreme cultural differences. Perhaps this is because Tony's background has influenced him to always speak politely and positively of others, despite possible difficulties that he may actually have with them.
From these interviews, we can see that all four people have their own cultural paradigms. Paradigms shape how we reason and how we view the world. Different cultural backgrounds create different paradigms, but there is no one typical paradigm for each individual culture. For example, I'm from rural Tasmania, Australia, which affects how I see the world. An example of different cultural paradigms is food. I mean, I can't understand how Americans eat peanut butter and jelly. I mean, it's so rich and disgusting.
Well, see, for us, peanut butter and jelly is like a staple food in your diet. It's an essential. I mean, kids take it to school, you just eat it. I mean, I used to have like 3 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches a day. They're pretty good. The thing I can't understand is when I went to Germany recently, I was pretty jet lagged, and so I sort of came back, took a shower, had a short nap, and then got up and I didn't know exactly what time it was, and I went downstairs expecting to have breakfast, right? And spread out all over the table is heavy breads and meats and cheeses and that yucky pate stuff, and I just could not understand how they could eat all this heavy food in the morning. I'm used to just a light bowl of cereal.
Well, but that's how we grew up. Like, we have it every morning, and that's just what we love, and we take it everywhere. We have it in school and everywhere. It's just our breakfast, and it's the best thing on Saturday morning to wake up and see that there's like this cheese and meat plate on the table. So, but what I can't understand is how like Asians eat the dinner from like last night. Like they eat this soup in the morning, and it was just really salty, and it's more like a dinner than a breakfast for me.
Well, you can't stand we eat soup in the morning. But for me, what is ridiculous that people will eat Vegemite in early morning. You know, Vegemite, it's not so weird for us, you know. That's just something really ridiculous for me.
How can you say that? I mean, I've been eating Vegemite since before I could walk. I mean, it's just natural for me to have like it scraped onto a piece of toast and eat it for breakfast. Come on. Paradigms should not cause problems as long as we recognise that they exist, and we are also operating under our own paradigms.
Also, paradigms can lead to hasty generalizations in the boarding house. Hasty generalizations are an overreaction of one incident that is attached onto the entire group of people. It describes that all members of a group must share the same peculiarities of this individual member from the group. The hasty generalization is more a claim than an accurate fact. From own experience, it can be said that many hasty generalizations have been made in the boarding house. For example, Germans are rude, or Asians eat healthy, interesting food, but most of them can be proven wrong. Like, not all Germans are rude. And I just went with my friend into town who was from an Asian country, and we went to McDonald's and had food, and obviously that's not really healthy. Most of them can be proved. Still, hasty generalizations are made and used to describe someone's personality without knowing that person. You can attack a person by hasty generalizations and therefore can cause a fight in the boarding house.
When you use hasty generalizations, they tend to be prejudiced, which leads to the ad hominem fallacy of attacking the person rather than the argument. And the argument is the thing that actually is the hasty generalization. So ad hominem is attacking or supporting a person rather than the argument. Westerners tend to categorize Chinese, Japanese, or Thai people as Asians, rather than taking the time to understand and differentiate the vast differences within each respective culture. Ad hominem fallacy also leads to special pleading. Special pleading is using double standards to excuse an individual or group. A common stereotype is that Germans are rude. From their standpoint, what other cultures perceive as rudeness is simply a frank or straightforward way of speaking. One girl from Singapore told me last week that the jacket I was wearing was a weird color and I should have bought a different one. I was very offended by that and felt pretty upset over it for a while, and I thought she was being quite rude. Later that day, a German girl made a similar comment, but I didn't dwell on it because I knew she was only sharing her honest opinion. This is special pleading because I had very different reactions to the same opinion coming from two different people.
Hasty generalizations, ad hominem, and special pleading can lead to false analogies. False analogies arise when you assume that because two people are similar in some respects, they are also similar in others. An example of this may be that two Americans live in the boarding house. One works hard and studies hard, and the other procrastinates. This can lead to people thinking that because one is lazy, that the other is too, leading to generalizations that all Americans are lazy. We need to distinguish similarities created by different cultures and similarities created by personal taste.
First dilemma could be the opposite of the first analogy because it just shows the black and white. First dilemma is just representing the logic fallacy of seeing everything in black or white. Students in a new environment in the boarding house where they have to speak English most of the time also have to cope with the lifestyle in Australia. This is very hard for them as they are from different countries. This could cause them to become quiet and introvert. However, the first dilemma could cause people to see just social and unsocial. When the introvert person then connect with the person who comes from his own culture, we see him as unsocial. However, they could just shy and scared. To get over the first dilemma, we have to get to know the person better and take them in. This might help them with their shyness and loosen them up a bit.
Connected to the false dilemma is the loaded question, as it draws everything into the extreme. A loaded question is a complex question which can be seen as an assumption or a trick question. It is performed when a question is asked that assumes something that has not been confirmed or acknowledged by all the people involved. For example, at a dinner table, someone has eating habits which might be polite in his country, but the other person at the table is offended by it. His loaded question would be, did you enjoy spoiling the dinner for all of us? This is a loaded question because we're saying yes or no. It would say he would admit that he spoiled the dinner for all of them. On the other hand, all the other people at the table might not see the same have not the same opinion like the person who asked the question. Maybe they didn't even notice it. Therefore, it's a loaded question. Those questions are made in the boarding house, but are ignored so a fight does not result. From these fallacies, we can go on to cause of bad reasoning. Pride is the ability of having a high opinion of yourselves and your importance. For example, patriots, they are very proud of their country and do not see the bad history behind that country. If people try to talk about that with them, they get pride. Things like this happen a lot of times and cause friction between inhabitants of the boarding house. To solve the friction, it is easy to get someone from a different culture who will conciliate between those two people and will calm down the argument.
Proud people could also be prejudiced. While racism and other types of prejudice are far from common in the boarding house, they can occur, resulting in negative feelings. They impact on the victim and can also affect other members' view of the person who's displaying prejudiced behaviour.
Another reason can be caused by laziness of studying problem closely. Laziness might be caused by the shortage of the language. Because of the laziness, people are not trying hard enough to communicate with other cultures. I have some international friends in my country, and they just like all international students in our school. They stay in group, speak their own language. They're not trying hard to communicate with locals. This from cultural clips, and Chinese have a Chinese friend, and German have German friends. To overcome laziness, you have to open up your own and communicate with other cultures.
If you're lazy, you also become ignorant because you don't make the effort to learn about and embrace other cultures. Ignorance is one of these 4 causes of bad reasoning. As children, we were slow to judge and quick to forgive, but now that we've grown up, we tend to develop judgmental tendencies. If we are diligent and avoid ignorance by overcoming our laziness, we can expand our knowledge of other cultures and ways of thinking. Once we've learned to fight pride, prejudice, laziness, and ignorance, our reasoning changes for the better, and we can gain the ability to look at issues from multiple viewpoints while still retaining the right to our own opinion.
Laziness and ignorance of other cultures cause you just talk your own language and do not learn the language of the culture you're living in. In the environment of the boarding house, a lot of students have to face the problem of the English. A lot of them are English second language speakers. They have to use the English to communicate with people around them. A poor English skill will affect their general life and also pressure them. A good English skill will help them with their personal expression, and it might help them feel happier to live in the boarding house. Therefore, the language skill plays a very important role in their general life. The limitation of the language does not only affect people's communication skill, but also affects people's mind. Some English second language students are not trying to communicate with people from other cultures, so they just stay in a group of people from their culture and use their home language.
The language and culture both reflect upon each other and are also different when it comes to greeting customs. Greeting customs are different everywhere around the world. Cultural groups usually have unique styles of greeting each other. In France, for example, it is polite to kiss on the cheek, generally 3 times. In Japan, you bow, and in America, a loud, firm handshake is the popular method. This loudness could be intimidating to the Japanese, who see it as very intrusive of their personal space, while the Americans would think that bowing was stiff and awkward.
So now we work out all the complications. How can we overcome them? What is our solution?
In the boarding house, we must recognise that everybody is from a different cultural background. But just because people are from similar backgrounds, they are not the same, as they live in their own paradigms. Once we recognise this, we can overcome our prejudices.
Hasty generalizations in the boarding house can also cause loaded question, which can lead to a fight. In this fight, we get protective of our culture and become proud. If we want to overcome this problem, we have to lose some of our self-righteousness, so we don't do hasty generalizations and avoid loaded questions and pride.
To overcome the language problem, we have to overcome our laziness, because the language problem also causes the first dilemma. And when we are not lazy anymore, we can overcome the language problem, and instead of seeing just black and white, we can see the whole pressure of the culture.
We have seen that people who are ignorant often resort to the ad hominem fallacy and employ special pleading, which simply fuels their ignorance. In order to overcome these weaknesses, we must familiarize ourselves with various languages to understand different cultural traditions.
Another weakness which leads to those fallacies are stereotypes. We want to finish our presentation by breaking these.
小时的妈妈是母鸡。
No, mate, I don't really like Vegemite. Hey, little buddy, how you doing?
It's okay. Not all Germans are scary and rude.
Is that all? Is that it?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it, Katie.
Okay, any questions, please, people?
Questions?
Questions?
No?
There must be questions.
Anything you want to add to our discussion?
Yeah, I have
Yes,
a question. Your issue was how can we, having looked at these stereotypes and cultural paradigms, how can we live in the boarding house? And you've given a really good, an excellent understanding of how you now will better understand life in the boarding house. How are you then going to pass that on? There are 4 of you, but the boarding house is how many people?
Yeah, it's
47.
Yeah, so how can this help generally?
The
like,
thing
the
is,
boarding house?
I did understand cultures before, but this presentation especially helped me to understand it even more and go to all the backgrounds and stuff. So I noticed a lot of times when someone was rude or something, and to a different culture, and I, for example, the German, I was just going up to him and was like, why did you say that? Because this is just rude, and explain it to him. And they mostly don't have any arguments or can have an argument with me because my understanding is higher than theirs because I did this presentation. And then they mostly sometimes they really understand and say, okay, yeah, you're right. And I think we can pass it on by just going up to people and explain it to them.
I think we've passed it on to a few people today who are in the boarding house as well. And I think a lot of it, like we said at the beginning when we first come, we're sort of shy and more quiet. But I think that sort of something people tend to do automatically if they're self-aware sort of is when they go to a new place, they sort of sit back at first and try to take in everything that's going on and then act accordingly. So if they see that other people are getting along with everyone from different cultures and making the effort and trying not to be prejudiced or other things like that, then it's easier for them to sort of say, okay, now that I've seen all of this, I can come into it and act the same, because you tend to act differently depending on which peer group you're in. And so when you come into this group of people who are grades 7 to 12 and you see how they're all acting differently, usually the grade 7s and 8s are kind of annoying and but
Is that a generalization?
yes. But you can see that as they grow up, sort of, they do mature and they do sort of fall into that role of, okay, now I'm understanding this, I can welcome new people into the boarding house as well, even if they are, for example, in year 11, a year 9 can still talk to them and say, well, welcome to the boarding house, this is how we make lunch, this is what we do here.
So my second question then is, you talk about different cultural paradigms of the visitors. Is there a culture of the boarding house? And if there is, how is it created and maintained?
Well, I think the culture of the boarding house is kind of that everybody tries to get along with everybody, and if someone brings something from the old country to the community, then we won't be like, oh, what is this? We will like, oh, can I try some? Or can you explain this to me, because I think it's very interesting. And often they bring something you're interested to, so from a different culture, and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds, I heard of this. And I think the culture is just that you grow in the boarding house, and when you get out of the boarding house, you come back and you just I think you gain so much that you can't say I'm coming from a culture anymore, because you had the experience to live with so many diverse cultures and and people, so you just took a bit of everybody.
So what are the implications as far as you being the older ones in the boarding house, and how can you help prevent these stereotypes and generalisations occurring?
Well, I think we're sort of, because we're the older students, we're the role models, as well as we've been there longer. Like, for example, this is my 3rd year in the boarding house. So, like, when people are new, they do tend to go to the people, like the sort of veterans, because they've been there the whole time and they know all the inner workings of the boarding house. And so if someone has a question, it's easy to say, hey, I can help. So we can pass it on in that way. And I don't know, I think just human curiosity makes it possible for people who come to the boarding house, because they know they're coming from a different thing. And part of the reason why they're coming is generally to learn English better and to go to school and to make international connections. And so when they come into the boarding house, our role as the older students is just to make that easier for them.
Yeah. Also, we're really excited when someone new comes. We're like, ooh, I want to come to the airport. Like, pick them up.
Going to the uniform shop.
Yeah.